Hello and welcome to the Hot News Channel, where we analyze the breaking news that is absolutely shaking the global order.
And for this deep dive, we are dissecting one of the most brazen, consequential, and just downright shocking international incidents in recent memory.
We're talking about the high-profile U.S. military operation executed on January 2nd and 3rd, 2026 in Venezuela.
Yeah, the sources we've aggregated, and this includes everything from military briefings, diplomatic cables, some leaked intel, it all paints a pretty startling picture.
A very startling picture.
Our material doesn't just detail the tactical reality of what happened, the literal snatch and grab of Nicolás Maduro and his wife, but it exposes the Trump administration's remarkably unapologetic rationale behind it all.
And that's really the core of our mission today, isn't it? We need to go beyond the headlines. We're here to dissect the facts of this lightning-fast operation, expose the administration's, stated goals.
Goals which are all about resource seizure and hemispheric control.
Exactly. And then we need to analyze the profound and immediate international legal and political crisis that has just erupted because of it.
The fallout is, it's unprecedented. This one single event touches every major geopolitical fault line we track.
Every single one.
You've got the resurrection of the Donroe Doctrine, the global dynamics of energy strategy, the cynical use of the war on drugs as a legal cover for an invasion.
And of course, the dangerously fraying relationship the U.S. has with major powers like Russia and China. This wasn't just a raid.
No, not at all. It was a reassertion of American power on fundamentally new, transactional, and frankly, aggressive terms.
The immediate shockwave from this event really can't be overstated. We are talking about the physical capture and extraction of a sovereign head of state.
A sitting president.
A sitting president, conducted by U.S. Delta Force under the cover of these incredibly sophisticated airstrikes. It's something the sources all say was basically unthinkable just a few years ago. Right. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the sheer audacity and the efficiency of the military operation itself.
From a purely professional military operational standpoint, the consensus in all of reporting is pretty much unanimous.
And what's the consensus?
That this was a textbook execution of a high-risk mission. It's been widely described in the sources as a spectacularly successful and flawless snatch and grab.
Flawless is the key word there. And I think it's important for you, the listener, to really understand the scale of the resources they committed for what was, at the end of the day, an hour-and-a-half action.
Right, to take out one man and his immediate security detail.
And the sources indicate the forces included a staggering array of assets. We're talking approximately 150 combat aircraft.
F-18s, F-35s, even B-1 bombers.
B-1 bombers, plus significant naval assets positioned just offshore.
And the inclusion of B-1 bombers, those are typically heavy strategic strike platforms. That just underscores the administration's desire for this overwhelming show of force.
It's a deterrent.
It's a massive deterrent. They weren't just there to drop bombs. They were there to signal a massive coordinated air campaign capacity, making sure absolutely no regional power or even any part of the Venezuelan military even thought about intervening.
So the extraction itself, the actual removal of Maduro, that was reportedly done by U.S. Delta Force.
They likely used specialized rotorcraft, specifically the ones operated by Task Force 160.
The Night Stalkers.
Often called the Night Stalkers, exactly. For anyone unfamiliar, these are highly modified helicopters, think specialized MH-60 Blackhawks, designed for exactly this kind of thing.
Low altitude, high speed, nighttime extractions, deep behind enemy lines.
Precisely. This sheer sophistication required just to get that team in and out of Caracas undetected, even before the air cover began. It just speaks volumes about a level of detailed planning involved.
And the swiftness of it all, the completeness of the neutralization was, it was extraordinary.
The whole operation was designed to achieve instant air superiority and just paralyze the command structure.
So before the extraction team even moved in,
before they were even close, U.S. forces had reportedly destroyed all functioning Venezuelan air defenses. And crucially, they simultaneously knocked out power across the capital.
Which is strongly suspected to be a cyber attack, right?
Oh, almost certainly. A highly effective cyber attack against Venezuela's, aging power grid infrastructure.
And the military success, in terms of U.S. assets, was total.
0 losses.
0. But reports do confirm a firefight at the point of capture.
Yes. Maduro's... personnel. They were reportedly killed while resisting the extraction.
That image of the U.S. taking no losses while neutralizing dozens really defines the asymmetry of this whole conflict.
It does. And of course, the final destination really emphasizes the cynical law enforcement pretext the administration is clinging to.
Where did they take him?
Maduro and his wife were extracted, flown immediately to U.S. soil. They are now being held in the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC Brooklyn in New York.
Wow. That is a deliberate, calculated step. Moving him immediately to federal custody anchors the entire operation in the domestic legal framework of that indictment.
Right. It lets the administration legally characterize this as just executing a warrant.
Instead of an act of war.
Which is exactly how the rest of the world sees it.
Okay, but the smoothness of it, the efficiency, that immediately raised a massive red flag among analysts, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Which leads to the widespread speculation about insider help or some kind of deep internal betrayal.
It has to. The sources all stress the complete lack of military opposition. If Maduro had some forewarning, which we'll get to, why was there zero deployment?
Exactly. No air defense engaged, no Venezuelan aircraft scramble. It just screams stand down order.
Or that key security and command personnel were, bought off or compromised in some way.
And this brings us to the most discussed individual in all the source material, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez.
Okay, tell us about her.
She has deep established ties to Qatar, and crucially, she was the former oil minister.
Which gave her control over the money.
It gave her access to and control over the most valuable resources, the revenue streams, the infrastructure of the state. And she is now, very conveniently, serving as the acting president.
And the theory that's circulating, which makes a very dark, cynical kind of sense, is that some kind of negotiation took place ahead of time.
The idea being that Rodriguez and others within that powerful Chavista system were willing to sacrifice the increasingly erratic Maduro.
Why? To save themselves.
To secure a transitionary period? Yes. It allows the remainder of the entrenched regime to stay in power and keep profiting, just, now under effective U.S. financial and resource control.
What's fascinating about that potential double deal is the dual narrative that you see now.
Right.
Rodriguez is publicly defiant. She's condemning the U.S. action as a kidnapping, calling it illegitimate.
But privately, if that deal was struck, her immediate assumption of the acting presidency suggests she was completely prepared for this outcome.
It allows the remaining Chavista system to maintain its internal legitimacy by, denouncing imperialism.
While at the same time, guaranteeing their economic survival by cutting a deal with the very same imperial power.
I'm just struggling to reconcile these reports. If the intelligence suggests a high-level betrayal involving Rodriguez, why did Maduro sign a decree declaring a state of external commotion and ordered defense plans to be implemented right before he was captured?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It suggests he had some forewarning that an attack was imminent. Doesn't that imply the betrayal was so close to him that his defense orders were just immediately countermanded or ignored?
That's exactly the question analysts are asking. The forewarning suggests he anticipated a kinetic action, but the entire security apparatus failed him completely.
So that failure points to a betrayal that was either a stand-down order given seconds before the strikes, or
so deeply systemic that the defense apparatus was already hollowed out. It implies key figures were already prioritizing regime survival under Rodriguez over Maduro's personal survival.
It turns the entire thing from a daring raid into a carefully orchestrated handoff.
A handoff, exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of information warfare, the immediate environment after the operation was just deliberately polluted.
Polluted with manufactured content.
Designed to create the illusion of instant popular consent.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting. In terms of 21st century information ops, immediately after the extraction, these AI-generated videos started circulating.
The ones showing Venezuelans take to the streets to celebrate Maduro's downfall.
Yes. And one specific fake video, even though it was quickly identified with a community note as AI-generated deepfake content, it still racked up over 5 million views.
And it was shared by Elon Musk.
Shared by Elon Musk, the richest man on the planet, using his massive platform to just amplify this completely fabricated triumph.
This reliance on completely fabricated content to instantly justify an action like this is a terrifying example of full-spectrum warfare.
It is.
The U.S. military achieved air superiority, and the AI propaganda achieved narrative superiority. The whole objective was to instantly create the optics of liberation.
But the authentic reporting from Caracas tells a starkly different story.
Completely different.
Reporters on the ground, whose coverage was often drowned out by all that AI noise, they indicated widespread fear, not spontaneous celebration.
People weren't dancing in the streets.
No, they were seen stockpiling food, fuel, medicine, like before a major hurricane or a natural disaster, is how one report put it.
And that fear is rational. It's completely rational, especially since the core Chavista regime is still functionally in charge through Rodriguez.
We need to remember that the Chavista system is more than just Maduro, right?
It's so much more. It's a vast, deeply entrenched political and social movement rooted in Hugo Chávez's legacy. It includes local political structures, neighborhood committees, paramilitary groups, loyal military commanders.
All of whom depend on the existing structure for their power and their economic survival.
Precisely. As one source noted, resistance to U.S. intervention isn't taking the form of a mass public uprising. It's taking the form of quiet survival, logistics, and daily, humble, simple stuff.
Because celebrating Maduro's downfall openly could still get you killed or arrested.
By the same power structure that has simply shifted its leadership.
This raises a really important point for the U.S. strategists. The triumphalism of this operation, it overlooks the fact that if the U.S. now tries to compel compliance, if they try to force new economic or political reforms, they have to deal with millions of committed Chavista loyalists.
Loyalists who see this as a foreign invasion. The decapitation operation only took out the head, but the deeply networked systemic body is still fully functional.
And it's poised for insurgency.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that tactical victory gives us the foundation, but let's talk about the why. Why now? Why this immense risk and resource commitment?
Right.
Let's turn to the motivations, because this is where the U.S. administration just completely dropped the mask.
They really did. It shows that the legal justification was merely a pretext for something far more aggressive.
The administration characterized the operation publicly as a surgical law enforcement operation.
Relying entirely on that pre-existing 2020 indictment that charged Maduro as a narco-terrorist.
Which allowed them to claim they were just executing a high-value domestic warrant.
And by doing that, they avoid the label of invasion or an act of war.
But critics and legal sources, they uniformly describe that indictment as sloppy and vague, don't they?
Oh, incredibly so. It failed to cite exactly how many tons of cocaine were involved. More critically, it relied on these highly tenuous, geographically strange connections.
Like what?
Like claiming Maduro facilitated drug trafficking for the Sinaloa cartel, a group primarily based thousands of miles away in Mexico. And it made these vague connections to Colombian groups like FARC or ELN, which have, constantly fluctuating political statuses.
So this strategy has a historical precedent.
A deep one. Analysts immediately compared it to the 1989 invasion of Panama to seize Manuel Noriega.
Under a very similar drug pretext.
Exactly. And what makes that comparison so cynical is the hypocrisy. Noriega was previously a paid CIA asset. He was getting substantial monthly payments throughout the 1970s.
And he himself facilitated drug trafficking under the nose of U.S. intelligence?
Of course. The narco-terrorist charge only became convenient when Noriega stopped being a reliable U.S. vassal and started bristling against U.S. control.
So the sources suggest the drug charge is just a convenient political weapon, a legal tool used to justify military force against inconvenient foreign leaders.
That's the bottom line. So if the legal claim was shaky, what was the primary immediate goal?
The administration's own straight talk provided the answer: resource acquisition and control.
They explicitly abandoned all the historical diplomatic language, the rhetoric of defending democracy or human rights,
Gone.
Gone. In its place was just naked resource seizure. The language from the president and his cabinet was incredibly straightforward.
Trump stated the U.S. will take control of the oil and explicitly take all of their resources.
Right. Promising that American corporations will spend billions rebuilding the infrastructure, but only to serve U.S. interests.
This is critical because Venezuela holds the largest known crude oil reserves globally.
An estimated 300 billion barrels? That's about 16 to 17% of the world's total.
And it's not just oil. The U.S. is targeting Venezuelan reserves of steel, aluminum, gold, and critical minerals.
So the goal is twofold: immediate profit and strategic power. Venezuelan oil capacity, if it's restored and controlled by the U.S., becomes a strategic energy weapon.
How so?
By injecting new supply into the global market at will, the U.S. gains significant leverage against China and Russia, both of whom rely on stable global energy prices and have had significant dealings with Caracas.
So controlling Venezuelan crude allows the U.S. to mitigate future oil price shocks and project economic power.
Exactly.
And when we drill down into who specifically benefits from this, the connections become even more transparently transactional.
Highlighting the influence of major political donors in shaping foreign policy.
We're talking about vulture funds.
Specifically, we have to look at the major Trump donor, Paul Singer. His hedge fund owns the rights to a staggering $21 billion judgment against Venezuela.
How did he get that?
Singer's fund bought this distressed Venezuelan debt for a fraction of its value, about $7 billion, just hoping to cash in when the regime eventually collapsed or was overthrown.
And the timing of this U.S. takeover is no accident.
Not at all. The operation perfectly positioned Singer to collect on that massive judgment. That's a $14 billion return on his investment.
And he'd collect how? Through the fire sale of seized Venezuelan assets.
Possibly through assets like Citgo, the national oil refining company the U.S. already controls. This is the definition of a political quid pro quo.
A major donor receives a massive financial windfall immediately following a major military operation.
Then you have the profound political payoff for key figures, notably Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Okay.
For decades, Rubio has been consumed by what he sees as his life's work of overthrowing the Cuban regime.
And Cuba's been propped up for years by Venezuela.
Economically propped up by preferential oil sales and revenue from Venezuela, which is now immediately and completely cut off.
So this action instantly places the Cuban government under extreme, maybe even unrecoverable economic pressure.
For Rubio, the sources note, capturing Maduro is a secondary political victory. The primary one is the economic strangulation of Havana.
And let's not forget the AI connection we talked about earlier.
Great, let's revisit that. The sources indicate that AI tycoons like Elon Musk, who are actively boosting the propaganda, have a strong vested interest in accessing Venezuelan mineral wealth.
The AI industry needs massive amounts of raw materials.
Especially critical minerals like lithium and rare earth elements for next-generation hardware. Venezuela has significant, largely untapped deposits of these crucial resources.
So the operation secures not just legacy fossil fuel assets, but also the raw materials for the next technological revolution.
It does. And if we step back and connect all of this to the fundamental ideology, this brazen act fully resurrects the Donroe Doctrine.
But in a profoundly more aggressive and cynical form than its original 19th century intent, which was just about keeping European empires out of the Western Hemisphere.
Precisely. The sources define the contemporary interpretation as asserting that America gets to do whatever it wants in the Western Hemisphere.
Denying access, economic partnerships, military activity.
To any rival great powers like Russia and China. It's an assertion of raw, unchallenged regional hegemony.
What's fascinating here is the ideological evolution. The U.S. is signaling a new phase of imperialism. Analysts are calling it the transactional empire.
Right. The new national security strategy implies the U.S. now treats its traditional allies and vassal states with a kind of cold calculation.
The intent being to exploit or abandon them based purely on strategic utility and economic benefit.
This is no longer about defending democracy or shared values. It's purely about asset seizure and control, using the Western Hemisphere as a resource base and an unchallenged power projection platform.
As one analyst noted, this is a fundamentally 19th century way of looking at the world.
Just dressed up with 21st century military technology. The core message is clear. The U.S. determines the fate and ownership of all assets on the American continent.
Okay, let's talk about the global reaction. The fallout in the international legal and political spheres was immediate and severe.
And it has fundamentally undermined what little remained of U.S. moral authority and global standing.
The most immediate diplomatic consequence was that emergency UN Security Council meeting.
Right, held in the immediate wake of the operation. And that meeting was just dominated by condemnation from rival powers.
Russia and China used the platform not just to criticize, but to strongly condemn this unilateral, illegal, and bullying action.
They cited the blatant violation of the UN Charter and the foundational principle of international law regarding state sovereignty and non-interference.
They pointed out that this act amounts to a kidnapping conducted under the cover of military strikes
against the sovereign state that posed no immediate threat to the U.S. homeland.
And the reaction from the UN Secretary General's office was equally serious.
His representative expressed deep concern that the rules of international law have not been respected and warned gravely that this unilateral act risks spiraling into a wider and more destructive conflict globally.
Because it establishes a dangerous precedent.
Exactly. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? The U.S. has profoundly lost its moral authority.
By invading a sovereign state, capturing its leader, and seizing its assets based on a flimsy domestic indictment, the U.S. has given its adversaries a gift.
An ironclad legal and ethical precedent. If the U.S. asserts the right to invade Venezuela to execute a domestic warrant, they cannot credibly protest if Russia applies a similar doctrine to justify further military action in Ukraine.
Or, and this is the big one, if China uses it as justification for military action against Taiwan.
Claiming it is merely asserting control over a renegade domestic province. The U.S. has exposed its own hypocrisy, and that hypocrisy legitimizes aggression globally.
As one source articulated it perfectly, Russia and China can point to the massive geographical distance between Washington and Venezuela, and then compare that to the short distance between mainland China and Taiwan.
And they can ask the U.S. with total credibility, why do you have anything to say about our regional actions when you have just acted lawlessly thousands of miles from your own borders?
Let's turn specifically to Moscow, because the operation coincided with these major hardening shifts in Russian diplomatic and military thinking.
Foreign Minister Lavrov and others in Moscow are reportedly reassessing the entire framework for negotiations regarding Ukraine.
And this is a direct consequence.
It is a direct consequence of the U.S. now being viewed as completely untrustworthy, unreliable, and overtly committed to acts of force and regime change.
So the tactical success in Venezuela validates the deepest held belief in Moscow.
That negotiation is pointless because the U.S. is willing to violate any agreement, any principle, anytime it is politically or economically convenient.
And the timing here is critical and, as the sources say, non-coincidental.
Right. Sources highlight that the Venezuela operation closely followed recent reports of a Ukrainian drone attack near President Putin's residence.
And this drone strike was reportedly the third such attack targeting Russia's nuclear command and control system, their C2, in 3 years.
Let's pause and explain C2 for the listener, because this isn't just a drone near a house. Nuclear command and control systems are the operational brain of a nation's nuclear deterrent.
The systems designed to survive an attack and ensure retaliation.
Attacking a nation's C2, even if you're unsuccessful, is universally considered an existential destabilizing threat. It's far beyond the typical scope of conventional conflict.
So while the U.S. administration and the CIA claimed the drones were targeting some generic military facility nearby, not Putin himself.
The intelligence community notes that the Russians are reading the same New York Times and Washington Post articles that openly brag about U.S. intelligence and technical assistance to Ukraine's drone offensive.
So the lack of U.S. condemnation or even acknowledgement of the precedent set by the Venezuela capture only hardens Putin's belief.
It hardens his belief that the U.S. is seeking total regime collapse, both locally in Caracas and globally in Moscow, and it demands that Russia reevaluate the terms of any future engagement or de-escalation effort.
And what about the allies? This situation placed U.S. allies in Europe in an incredibly uncomfortable position.
It forced them to confront the hypocrisy of their own adherence to international law and their dependence on the U.S. security umbrella.
It was pure political terror on display.
It really was. Take the UK's opposition leader, Keir Starmer. He was visibly terrified when reporters asked him directly to condemn the attack.
He avoided it.
He completely avoided it, claiming he needed to get all the material facts together, even though the White House had been openly and brazenly admitting the capture for hours.
His evasion highlights the impossible balancing act. Condemn the U.S. and risk the entire Anglo-American security relationship.
Or defend the U.S. and shred any last scrap of adherence to the UN Charter.
And the EU's response was, as one source put it, laughable in its attempt to thread this needle.
Key figures, like Estonia's Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, stated that while the principles of international law must be respected now, implying the moment they were violated is already past and unaddressable.
She also simultaneously stated that Maduro lacks legitimacy,
thereby trying to justify the U.S. action without explicitly endorsing the military invasion.
But our sources indicate that European leaders are privately panicking.
Deeply. They feel the U.S. has definitively dropped the mask. They understand that their entire post-war security structure is built upon adherence to predictable international law.
And the U.S. is now acting with brazen, lawless aggression purely for resource acquisition. This shift to a transactional empire worries them.
It worries them deeply. They fear the U.S. might next make unilateral deals with great powers like Russia or China that completely ignore European interests, leaving them vulnerable to Russian pressure.
And potentially abandoned by Washington.
They feel that they are no longer respected allies, but are being treated as vassals whose only role is to pay for U.S. military bases and uphold the geopolitical narrative, even when that narrative contradicts foundational laws.
So let's talk about the threat of escalation. The sources are very clear on this. The tactical success of the Venezuela operation has dangerously emboldened the administration.
And this is evident in the immediate, direct threats launched against several other regional leaders and countries in the hours following the capture.
Venezuela wasn't the end goal.
It appears to be a proof of concept.
The president's rhetoric immediately following the extraction was just shockingly direct. He was listing next targets without any of the typical diplomatic fluff or pretense of democracy promotion.
He immediately went after Cuba, stating it is ready to fall and its days are numbered, specifically citing the fact that Cuba has now been cut off from all Venezuelan oil income.
The economic pressure is intended to collapse the regime instantly.
Then there was Colombia. Trump called its president Gustavo Petro, a left-leaning leader, a sick man who likes making cocaine, who has to watch his ass.
He suggested a U.S. operation against Petro is imminent because, in the administration's view, Petro is running cocaine mills and cocaine factories.
It mirrors the Noriega precedent exactly. You frame political opposition as high-level drug trafficking to create a military pretext.
And the threats extended north to Mexico.
With the U.S. signaling aggressively that Mexico needs to get their act together regarding the southern border, the administration renewed threats of land strikes against cartels operating across the border.
Which would be a severe violation of Mexican sovereignty.
And could easily lead to unintended conflict with Mexican security forces.
But the ultimate strategic target he mentioned was the most surprising because it lies so far outside the Western Hemisphere's conventional geopolitical hotspots.
Greenland.
Trump stated, "We need Greenland from a national security situation because the area is covered with Russian and Chinese ships." He argued that Denmark is incapable of defending it,
citing their defense boost as being one more dog sled.
The Greenland threat needs deep unpacking. The strategic value there is massive.
As the Arctic ice melts, new shipping lanes are opening up, creating crucial trade routes and military access points that Russia and China are aggressively staking claims over.
And Greenland holds vast, untapped reserves of critical minerals,
including rare earth metals, which are essential for modern technology and defense.
Geographically, it's also crucial. It commands the GIUK gap, the choke point between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK.
Control over that gap is essential for monitoring and restricting Russian naval activity in the Atlantic. This explicit threat to Denmark, a NATO ally, is seen by analysts as a move to secure a key forward supply base and control the Arctic.
And perhaps more cynically, to push the European Union toward conflict with Russia while the U.S. secures its assets.
This action also has clear, dark ties to the Middle East and the escalating tensions with Iran.
Right. Sources reveal that Israeli media and key figures, including those close to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, have used the successful Venezuelan operation to signal aggressively that the U.S. is ready to attack Iran next.
The slogan circulating is, Venezuela today, Iran tomorrow.
And the strategic logic here revolves entirely around oil and supply security.
If Iran makes good on its long-standing threat, a threat it has notably never executed, to shut down the Strait of Hormuz in response to a major attack, global oil supply would collapse,
triggering an economic catastrophe.
So the U.S. would need an immediate, massive alternative oil source capable of stabilizing the global market.
And Venezuela, with the world's largest known reserves, provides that necessary strategic backup capacity.
Specifically, Venezuelan heavy crude is strategically valuable because many global refineries are specifically designed to process it, making it an ideal substitute if Middle Eastern supply is disrupted.
And there is a strong accusation from U.S. analysts that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and his allies are attempting to lure the current U.S. president into a war with Iran.
The belief is that the president, feeling bulletproof and politically untouchable after the flawless Venezuela operation, might now believe he can take substantial military action against Iran without major repercussions, ignoring the risks of a regional conflagration.
Okay, so here's where the analysis turns stark. While the extraction was tactically flawless, military and regional experts stress unanimously that the operation was only a decapitation attempt.
The underlying Chavista system, as we discussed, remains fully functional and deeply entrenched in the societal fabric.
And the critical mistake, the sources warn, is confusing a tactical military victory with strategic geopolitical success.
Any immediate attempt by the U.S. to compel compliance, to put boots on the ground beyond a small force, or to try and control the country's vast territory and economy will result in immediate, bloody, and complicated insurgency and civil war.
Analysts are warning that this victory will instantly turn into a total quagmire.
Or Vietnam. The insurgency would be complex. It would be urban, rooted in neighborhood organizations, potentially supported and supplied by foreign powers like Cuba, Russia, and China.
The U.S. military is structurally unprepared for the political and social management required to control a nation of 30 million people who just saw their sovereign leader violently extracted.
And this inherent risk is made exponentially more dangerous by the external commentary surrounding the U.S. president's behavior. Sources note his tendency toward impulsivity, his slurred words, his reliance on superficial optics of success over sober strategic thought.
This mental volatility increases the danger that he might make impulsive military decisions.
Like ordering a limited occupation or expanded strikes based on the desire to look strong, leading the U.S. into wars it cannot sustain or win.
The irony is profound. History shows occupying forces often fail.
As Genghis Khan famously observed, occupations turn soldiers into jailers. The U.S. seems intent on ignoring this crucial historical lesson. Believing its military might makes it immune to the complexities of occupation and the deeply rooted nature of internal ideological resistance.
Especially when the cause is resisting imperialism. So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? The U.S. has forcefully reasserted the Donroe Doctrine, abandoning its allies and threatening its neighbors in the explicit pursuit of resource control.
This was a clear, brazen act of transactional asset seizure, masked by a shallow legal pretext, and it establishes a profoundly dangerous global precedent.
The administration believes its tactical military success in Venezuela proves they are bulletproof and can operate outside of international norms without suffering significant blowback.
And that leaves us with a provocative thought for you to consider.
The U.S. has achieved a swift, kinetic victory. But what specific non-military retaliatory action by Russia or China in the coming year, be it financial isolation, a devastating cyber offensive against key infrastructure, or a massive diplomatic realignment that completely isolates U.S. interests in Asia, could expose the limits of U.S. power and shatter this illusion of invincibility?
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material and the geopolitical shockwave emanating from Caracas.
If you liked our news analysis, press like and subscribe to our channel for more breaking news. Goodbye until we meet again.